You have to know this. The fact that I'm here matters. The fact that you're there matters. This is no accident. None of us are.
هذه هي قوة مصر.
لقد قررت أن أتنحى تماماً.
Red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%. We're down over 16%.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Because the Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier is going to meet is going to be better than the Muhammad Ali.
Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
نريدها قومة ونهضة إسلامية.
سنعود إلى كويتنا كما عهدناها دار أمن وأمان.
Yes, we can.
لقاء تاريخي سيجمعنا بآخر رئيس للاتحاد السوفييتي ميخائيل غورباتشوف، الرجل الذي احتل مركزاً بأهم 100 شخصية غيرت في تاريخ العالم. سيستضيفنا بمكتبه الذي استضاف زعماء العالم لنناقشه بمحاور عدة، فتابعونا.
بطل في نظر البعض ومدان إلى درجة الاتهام بالخيانة في نظر آخرين. تربى على عرش إمبراطورية ضخمة وغادرها بعد انكسارات وأزمات على المستويين السياسي والإنساني. حائز على جائزة نوبل للسلام وأيضاً على جائزة جرامي أوورد في الموسيقى. إنه خليط بين الفلاح والسياسي، اليساري والليبرالي. لا تزال حقبته مثار جدل دائم. شارك رونالد ريغان في إنهاء الحرب الباردة، ولعب دورا كبيرا في إسقاط جدار برلين وتوحيد ألمانيا. وفي عهده تفكك الاتحاد السوفييتي نتيجة سياسات البيرسترويكا. إنه آخر رؤساء الاتحاد السوفييتي السابق ميخائيل غورباتشوف.
Good morning, Mr. President. Hello, alaikum salam. Hello, Mr. Gorbachev. It is a pleasure meeting you, Mr. President. Can we go inside? Let me start with my first question, Mr. President. You were the president of the Soviet Union. You also been chosen one of 100 most influencers in the history. You were born in a far village away from the spotlight of Moscow. You were the son of a farmer, so if you can tell us, what grabbed you into politics? Where did you find the interest in politics?
Вы правы, что я из крестьян.
You're right, I come from a peasant background. My interest in rural life and the life of peasants, of farmers in agriculture, this is something to which I devoted much of my life. And this interest still continues. How did everything start? Well, it started with the fact that my grandfather on my mother's side was indeed a peasant. My grandfather on my father's side also was a peasant, and both of them were poor peasants. When the First World War ended, they came back to their villages. They were at different fronts. And in my village, which you mentioned here, which was indeed a hinterland very far away, they started to think about building a better life after that experience of the war. Initially, they tried to organize a commune with everything being common.
I would like to ask you a direct question because you influence the world. What do you think of Islam as a religion?
I respect Islam, and as a person who was baptized in the Russian Christian religion, I find the religion of Islam interesting. There are many interesting aspects in Islam. Of course, there are also fundamentalists. And I think this is a problem for all of us.
You changed Russia, you changed the whole Soviet Union, you even changed the world. What change have you sought?
I proposed a big project for my country when I became the leader of the Soviet Union. It was a big program. It concerned both domestic politics and international politics. All was interconnected. It would have been difficult to build a good life, to focus on change, on positive change within the country if the world is turbulent, if there are conflicts in the world, if things are bad around the country. And so I had to give a lot of attention to international politics. And I must say that I got a lot of support from people and throughout the world. And this sustained me through those years.
أحيانا إعادة البناء تؤدي إلى بداية الانهيار. برنامج إعادة البناء البروسترويكا هو برنامج إصلاحي اقتصادي أعده غورباتشوف لإعادة البناء الاقتصادي في الاتحاد السوفييتي. صاحب هذا البرنامج برنامج اقتصادي إصلاحي آخر وهو برنامج الشفافية لغلاسنوست. ولكن على عكس ما توقع غورباتشوف نفسه بأن سلسلة البرامج الإصلاحية هذه هي من أدى إلى انهيار الاتحاد السوفييتي.
Mr. President, you were the first president in the Soviet Union that went down in the streets for the people to convince them with your dream. Did you want to give them a Soviet Union dream similar to the American dream?
It is particularly challenging when you deal with change, and we had to initiate change in our country. It was our duty to change. We ultimately concluded that the entire system needed to be changed. The economic system needed to be changed. We needed to put an end to the authoritarian system. We needed democracy. We concluded that we needed democracy and again democracy. So all of these challenges, all of these tasks were enormous. And I have to tell you that we felt the support of the people. And it is only with that support that we could move forward rather successfully. But some people didn't like it, particularly those who enjoyed all kinds of benefits from the old system. We needed the kind of process, the kind of events that would also make it possible for other people to start change. We really made our best efforts to create a normal international environment, to build relations of partnership and even friendship with the United States. And it started to happen.
يعتقد البعض بأن سياسات غورباتشوف الإصلاحية هي من مهد وأسس لانهيار الاتحاد السوفييتي، ويعتقد البعض الآخر إلى يومنا هذا بأن غورباتشوف قد تعرض لخيانة كبرى، حيث انهار الاتحاد السوفييتي رسميا في 25 من ديسمبر عام 1991، وأصبح بعد ذلك بوريس يلتسن أول رئيس روسي منتخب في تاريخ روسيا.
انهار الاتحاد السوفييتي وتفكك رسمياً في 25 من ديسمبر من العام 1991، وكان بوريس يلتسن أول رئيس روسي منتخب في تاريخ روسيا. وعلى الرغم من امتلاك روسيا أعظم ترسانتين للأسلحة التقليدية بخلاف الأسلحة النووية، إلا أن احتفاظها بهذا التفوق العسكري بدا مستحيلاً، خاصة مع التدهور الاقتصادي المتزايد وتفشي الفساد نتيجة الكبت وتضاؤل إيمان الشعب بالاتحاد السوفييتي. لذلك انهار الاتحاد السوفييتي من الداخل قبل الخارج، ومهدت سياسة الرئيس السوفييتي ميخائيل غورباتشوف لانهيار الاتحاد السوفييتي بعد أن قدم وعوداً بإعادة بناء الدولة وضبط العلاقات السوفييتية الأمريكية. إلا أن الانقسام الداخلي في الجيش الأحمر السوفييتي أوصل بوريس يلتسن على ظهر دبابة إلى سدة الحكم.
Friendship is something important. Talking about friendship, I would love to talk about Yeltsin. And talking about the end of the Soviet Union. Do you think that Yeltsin betrayed the Soviet Union?
I think for all of us, for all citizens of the Soviet Union, for all citizens of Russia, this was a big loss. This was a big drama. It's also a loss for the world, because the influence of Russia, of the Slavic community, is very important. There's a lot of it that is very moral, that is very humane, that is very peaceful, so it represents certain values. The second part of your question about the end of the Soviet Union.
And Yeltsin, of course, is involved.
Have you read my books?
Yes, I read one book that you said in your first chapter that you were planning to go for your last day in the office, but you received a phone call that they told you that Yeltsin is already in your office. Do you remember that phone call?
Well, I remember everything. I remember not just that, but many other things as well. But let me give you a general answer that represents my creed, my belief. I certainly could have sent Boris Yeltsin to some faraway land. But I decided that this would not be a Christian way to behave.
You are a peacemaker.
One important fact was that during the attempted coup, during the putsch, when I and my family were isolated in the Crimea, he took the right position, being in Moscow. He didn't accept any deal with the coup plotters, and that was an important thing that he did at that point. And it tells you about him as a person. And that is why even today I cannot say that I regret not having taken strong steps against him before that.
Я думаю, я поступал правильно.
I think I did the right thing. I think I acted rightly and, as I said, in a Christian way.
Mr. Gorbachev, you helped the world in weapon reduction. Can you talk more about the weapon reduction?
Но Рейган был человеком своеобразным.
Reagan was a very particular kind of person. On the one hand, you could call him a dinosaur. He was a real dinosaur. On the other hand, he had the talent, the political ability, the kind of understanding of how the situation was, of what the situation was, that he and Gorbachev were facing this question. Can you go beyond your differences? Can you meet each other halfway? Initially, the Geneva meeting was just a get-acquainted meeting. Particularly the Americans thought that, well, it's just a get-acquainted meeting. But I took a different line. In order for us to have a good conversation, in order for us to start building mutual understanding, we need to say something to the people. People should know what we talk about. And if they see that the Soviet Union and the United States are talking and that they can reach some agreements, that is good for the world. That is good for everyone. And we made a very important statement there in Geneva, which is still important, that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. And then, a little later, we resumed the negotiations, went back to the negotiating table, and the negotiations resulted in 1987 in the first agreement, the first treaty on eliminating the medium-range missiles. Two classes of nuclear missiles were eliminated, were destroyed as a result of that first agreement. And at the same time, we also developed a very impressive system of verification. The system of verification worked well. It proved its worth and its strength. I became a Nobel Peace Prize winner for my contribution. And this is a kind of medal that you really have to earn. And you also have to continue, after you earn it, you have to continue to fight for these same ideas that underpin the Nobel Peace Prize.
You've been the president of the Soviet Union. You saw the Berlin Wall falling, and you saw the Soviet Union collapsing, and sadly you lost a child, and sadly you lost a wife. What is the most thing that affected you personally from them all?
Ты посмотришь на фотографию, да?
You're looking at the photograph.
Yeah, the photo, yes.
Да. Я думаю, что и Раисе мне повезло в жизни.
I think that both Raisa and myself were happy individuals, happy people.
Может быть, это самая большая удача.
Lucky people. Perhaps that's my biggest luck. That is to say, my wife. And when I lost her, it was the loss of the person who was closest to me in my life. I think after one's mother, it's one's wife. And she was more than just a wife, more than just someone who bears your children and brings them up, which is very important, but she was more than that. She was truly a colleague. She was a well-educated person. She graduated from the Department of Philosophy of Moscow University, and that's where we met. She was a real princess. She was a real princess. In your country, in order to be a prince, you have to be from a certain background, by birth, by your heritage.
She looks like a princess.
Well, you have recognized this. You agree. For me, she was a princess. And I like to hear what you have just said. I received the greatest support in my life from her by being so close to me, by being so near and dear to me throughout my life. And she always stood by me.
إن الله سبحانه وتعالى ناصرنا بفضل سواعدهم وعزيمتهم وبفضل منظمة الأمم المتحدة ومناصرة الأشقاء والأصدقاء وجميع الخيرين والشرفاء في العالم، وإن خروج الغزاة آت لا ريب فيه بإذن الله العلي القدير، وسنعود إلى كويتنا كما عهدناها دار أمن وأمان وواحد أصيلة وارفة الظلال يستظل تحتها كل الطيبين والشرفاء من الكويتيين وإخوانهم المقيمين يعملون يدا واحدة من أجل الخير والبناء، مصداقا لقوله عز شأنه: يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تنصروا الله ينصركم ويثبت أقدامكم. صدق الله العظيم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
For the sake of our principles, for the sake of the Kuwaiti people, we stood our ground because the world would not look the other way. Ambassador El-Saba, tonight, Kuwait is free. We are very happy about that.
Mr. Gorbachev, I would like to ask you a question that matters my region, the Middle East. To be more specified, Kuwait. On 1990, on the 9th of September, you've met with Bush, the President, George W. Bush, to discuss the situation in Kuwait, between Iraq and Kuwait. And he discussed with you the solution of war. Bush came out of that meeting and he said that you will not support to use force at the beginning, but if it is necessary, then freeing Kuwait through war would be our last choice. But it was approved from your side. Is that a fact? People in my country would like to know your situation and your decision that day.
Gorbachev's position was, above all, that Iraq has to evacuate Kuwait, that Iraq has to return to its territory. I branded them as aggressor. I said that they wanted to use the turmoil that was happening everywhere at that time and wanted to use that in order to occupy a neighboring country. We had agreed with the United States that we no longer were enemies, and at our summit in Malta, we proclaimed the end of the Cold War. And then suddenly this happens. Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. And from the very beginning until the very end, my position was that Iraq had to withdraw, even though the Iraqis were trying to sway me from that position. Several visitors, several talks were held, but I told to all of them, you have to withdraw, you have to go. At the same time, I was telling Bush that it would be wrong for them to go as far as the capital of Iraq, to go as far as Baghdad. I said that would not be different from the invasion. That would be a similar policy. I think it was difficult to get that recognized, but I think that ultimately we succeeded. Ultimately, we succeeded. And so I had no hesitation in condemning the aggression. I had no hesitation in getting Saddam Hussein to withdraw. From the very start, I said that we should avoid bloodshed, but we should get the result, and that is the re-establishment of Kuwait's independence. And I think we did everything to achieve that goal. And I congratulate Kuwait and the people of Kuwait. And I want you to convey to Emir, to His Majesty, and I'm sure also to the people, to the citizens of Kuwait, my wishes of prosperity.
You were the first president of the Soviet Union that went down to the street to convince people for change. You gave Russia democracy. Russia practiced democracy for the first time because of you. Today's democracy in Russia, is that what you've dreamed of?
When I respond to these questions, generally, I always say that we are in transition. We are on a path of change, of democratic change, and we are only halfway along that path, no more than halfway. We have to continue along that path to develop democracy, to make democracy take root. Any person who is casting a shadow on democracy, who is denouncing democracy, I think that is a person who should be condemned. Those are people who would perhaps benefit from ending democracy. Those are people who perhaps even expect, to benefit financially from ending democracy. No, we should continue along democratic lines. And if all of us do it, if we understand that we need democracy, if we understand also that we need to cooperate, that we need to establish freedom, then I think ultimately we will succeed. But it's a difficult path. It's a difficult path, and sometimes we stumble. We do stumble, like after ending the Cold War. We stumbled. The end of the Cold War opened many opportunities. Everyone was happy, and we did quite a bit working together. But then the breakup of the Soviet Union pushed our partners, American partners, toward a feeling of victory. The Soviet Union is no more, then we're the masters of the universe. Everything is ours. That was a foolish policy. And that resulted in many bad things. So we now have to go back to the same, to that path. It doesn't mean that we have to repeat the same things that we did then, but we have to observe this principle.
Before 3 days, I've met President F.W. de Klerk, which send you his regards. We met him in his house.
Thank you, and maybe you could give him a call and tell him that we had a good conversation, that we remembered him, and he really is a very good and very worthy person.
Sure, I will, Mr. President. But we talked with him about democracy, and he has a point of view, which is that every society has the right to create their own democracy, to design their own democracy. What do you think, Mr. President?
Во времена до этого, когда мир делился на...
You know, in the past, when the world was divided into the Soviet bloc and the Western countries,
опыт их и наш.
We called some countries people's democracies. We know that there were also many countries, including in the Islamic world, that were, for example, proclaiming socialism.
Of course.
Они, конечно, могут сказать, что не прав Горбачев. Мы социалисты.
Well, of course, even now they can say that Gorbachev is wrong and that they were socialist, but they had their own kind of socialism. I think that the important thing is that there are principles. There are certain principles of democracy. Democracy means power to the people. Democracy means elections. Democracy means a system that is not easy to develop, for example, in the Islamic world, where there are certain traditions of inherited power. But if they want to adopt certain principles, if they want to take that path with their own traditions, with their own culture, well, so be it. Culture is important because culture is the people. It's the people with its customs, with its traditions. But the principles have to be observed. I think that you don't have to rush. You have to search for your own way. And I think that the more we cooperate, the more we have exchanges of everything, the more it is likely that new generations will find a way. Will find a way to add to our knowledge.
Но я вот когда спрашиваю, а как вы вот говорите, надо улучшать, укреплять демократию? Я говорил одно.
How do you think we should strengthen democracy, improve democracy? I always answered that the most important thing, the decisive thing in democracy is people's participation. People's participation. Democracy is demos and krat. Krat, power. Demos, the people. Power to the people.
Let me go, Mr. President, for your early days, if you allow me. The Soviet Union was the sun and the United States was the moon. Cold War, space race, movies, sports, even jokes. Have you seen the United States of America as your enemy because of all that?
Вообще, как нашего противника.
Certainly as our adversary.
Но я скажу другое.
But I can tell you something.
Уже из нашего опыта,
based on our
жизни, работы,
experience
деятельности, моей и Рейгана.
my work with President Reagan. When we started to get closer, when we started our meetings, when we started taking those very important decisions from which the entire world benefited, at that time, among other things, we agreed on people-to-people exchanges. We agreed that people should meet more often, and those people-to-people exchanges were very important, and I described that in my book.
The
Soviet Union invited a group of Americans to visit the Soviet Union on a tour, and it was a joint tour on the river Volga. They were in the same boat, Volga, and its tributaries actually contain 70% of the population of our country. So they took that boat trip together with the Soviets, Americans and Soviets, and the day after they met, or the third day after they met, they became fast friends. They became so close, as though they had been together for years. And then a similar visit happened when our group went to the Mississippi and spent some time with Americans. And it took them just a couple of days, a few days, to become friendly, to start to understand each other, to develop mutual interest. And I said, Mr. President, President Reagan, both of us have to bear in mind that our people meet and that they reach agreement very quickly. Whereas you and I, whenever we talk, it takes us a long time, and even then we do not always agree. And I said, Mr. President, if it continues like this, then our two nations, our people, will get rid of us if we don't reach agreement. People know. People do find out how to get close. We have to promote respect of different nations. We have to fight phobias. We have to be respectful. We have to appreciate others. During the Middle Ages, the world benefited so much, so greatly from the East, from the Oriental world. That's amazing.
ميخائيل غورباتشوف شخصية مثيرة للجدل، فهو بطل بنظر الكثيرين ومدان لدرجة الخيانة بنظر الكثيرين أيضا. ساهم مع الرئيس الأمريكي الراحل رونالد ريغان بإنهاء الحرب الباردة، كما ساهم بشكل أكبر في إسقاط حائط برلين وتوحيد ألمانيا، فحاز بعد ذلك على جائزة نوبل للسلام.
Even you, Mr. President, changed your view about Reagan. You called him at the beginning a dinosaur. Then you called him a great president. And by the end of his period, you became partners in peace. What was the most important thing about Reagan? What made him a good partner?
У каждого человека своя есть история жизни.
Well, every person has his or her background, his or her life experience. But in order to be able to claim leadership, in order to get the trust of the people, people should see you as someone who is very committed. Who is very committed to certain human values, to the most important human values. not only in rhetoric, but also in deeds. And every time brings forward leaders. I think your generation will soon be claiming leadership. How old are you?
I'm 27.
Well, that's amazing. That's really amazing. In 1988, and then in 1989, that was the turning point in the history of perestroika. In 1989, we had the first open and fair elections in our country. No one interfered. The Communist Party only organized those elections, but it did not interfere in people's choice. So that was historic, the first democratic, fair and free elections in our country. The next morning after the elections, I had a meeting with the members of the Communist Party Politburo, and I saw immediately when I entered the room that they were very tense. And I said, congratulations, congratulations to all of you. And they said, you're congratulating us on what? They basically indicated that they did not trust the people. When the Communist Party decided everything, only a half of the members of the Supreme Soviet were communists. But on that occasion, when people voted freely, they elected 84% of the members of the Communist Party. So they elected a different kind of communist, more like social democratic kind of communist. And one of the members of the Politburo said, they're not real communists, those who were elected. And I said, what do you think? Is a communist a person who just likes to sit there and only concerns with his own benefit and with his family and is not concerned with the people? Is that the right kind of communist? I asked him. So those were real elections, elections when the ballots included several people, from at least 2 to 17 candidates per each seat. People did have a choice. People did have, for the first time, freedom of choice, and that produced an amazing result.
Mr. Gorbachev, you have plenty of achievements. Can you talk about the current achievement, which is your foundation? Can you talk more about your foundation?
I created this foundation, and I'm still working. I'm still active here in my foundation, and then I created another organization where many countries are represented, Green Cross International. It's a global environmental organization. It is still active and they're still working very hard. So I continued to work, and I do not see myself as someone who lost, as someone who was defeated. At a particular point in the political battle, I did lose, but all of my ideas are still working, and the ideas that we represented, I think, will continue. The new generation, I think, will pick up those ideas, and they will work for their country and the world.
Okay, Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of Britain, called you as a person or as a leader that she preferred to work with. If you were the president now, who would you prefer to work with? Is it Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton?
Я все-таки человек уважительный.
Well, I'm a person who respects others, and therefore I trust the American people to make the right choice. They will sort things out and they will decide.
Any regrets, Mr. President?
Что нет Раисы.
I regret that Ra'is is not with us.
Что годы уходят.
I regret that years are passing.
Уже пошло дело к 90 годам.
And I'm on the path to being 90.
Это больше, чем у тебя.
I'm a lot older than you are.
Yes, you are, Mr. President. And do you have a message for the youth in the Middle East and the world?
We're going through an exceptionally important and really crucial period in our history. And it's our common history. I'm saying it's common history because even before this was present, but today we live in a global world. All of those things that we face and that we do not always respond to shows that we have not yet learned to live in a global world and to manage the affairs of the global world. And it'll be becoming even more global. So we must learn to live in a global world. And not by giving every benefit and every privilege to one part of the world while others do not get anything. We have to build a world where everything benefits. We have to respect the people, and there is a danger now that we will stray from that path of moving toward a more global world. There is a real danger, but we should not panic. We should remember that the most important thing that we have, that any person has, is life. And we have to use our life to the fullest in order to do good things. And this is my message and my greetings to all of you.
Но эта тема отдельная. Вопрос последний, который вы задали, это отдельная тема.
However, I must say that this last question is a very big question, and it would take some time to truly answer it, and maybe we'll do it sometime in the future. But again, the message is we need to learn to live, to respect, and to believe, to have faith in one another. Without this faith in one another, we wouldn't have been able to achieve anything during Perestroika. So I wish you good luck.
Thank you. Can you allow us, Mr. Gorbachev, to go down for the museum with you?
Пойдемте, пойдемте.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
في عام 1987 وجه الرئيس الأمريكي السابق رونالد ريغان خطابا شديد اللهجة ومباشر إلى غورباتشوف يطلب فيه تدخله في إسقاط حائط برلين، فقال: أسقط هذا الجدار، أسقط هذا الجدار الآن.
This is the piece of the Berlin Wall.
And also this is the bust of Winston Churchill.
Yes.
And this was the Churchill Prize that was given to him.
I wanted to ask Mr. Gorbachev if you can tell him. I remember the speech of Reagan when he said Dear Mr. Gorbachev, if you're seeking peace, Mr. Gorbachev, if you're seeking democracy, Mr. Gorbachev, turn down this wall.
Tear down this wall. Он вспоминает знаменитую речь Рейгана: господин Горбачев, снесите эту стену.
Самое интересное, Паша переводил как раз, мы были в Америке.
We were in the United States, in America, on the West Coast.
На Западе. И его сын организовал
Reagan's son moderated
3 встречи
3 meetings
с гражданами.
With the people there. Big audience.
Yeah.
Right.
О Рейгане мы говорили.
And we talked about Reagan.
Yes.
И задавали всегда вопросы.
And they asked the same question.
Yes.
А как вы относитесь?
How did you react to that speech?
They loved
to that
the American
speech.
Я говорил.
And I said to them.
Да нет, говорю, мы как-то особо внимание не обратили внимания.
We did not pay too much attention to that speech.
Он ведь артист.
Because we knew that Reagan's first profession was actor.
Он сцену разыграл.
And so this was a scene that he acted.
So he's a good actor.
Но он был хороший актер.
А?
Он был хороший актер. Актер он был хороший.
Нет.
No.
Not particularly.
No. Yes.
А все-таки человек он оказался.
But he turned out to be a good man.
Серьезный.
A good man and a serious person.
Your partner in peace.
Вы были партнерами по миру.
Стали.
We became partners in peace.
Yes. Yes.
Сейчас они хотят вручить и
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
This is a ship from me back home. It represents Kuwait. This is where we use it to go all over the world. It is very simple. It is very simple. And hopefully it didn't break yet. I can bring you a better one if you want. Because we're traveling from country to another.
Он пока еще не сломался, а если сломается, я вам еще один привезу.
Но я должен сказать, что я люблю. Если вы обратили внимание, я в кабинетах.
Good. I saw your boat in the office. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And also I told you about the book. The book Rakan, the book that I was telling him about. That I read the part of this book. This is an amazing book.
Это книга очень интересная. Книга называется «После Кремля», но здесь она по-другому названа.
This is one of the, and this is the part where I told you, Mr. President, about the phone call that you received regarding that Yeltsin is already in your office.
Об этом эпизоде, когда вы ехали в Кремль и вам звонком сообщили, что Ельцин с друзьями уже там в вашем кабинете.
Amazing
и
book.
так далее.
Amazing
книга
book.
Мне очень понравилась, книга замечательная.
Would you mind signing it for me, please?
Просят расписаться на этой книге. Так что давайте я подержу.
غورباتشوف اليوم يقول أنا لم أهزم ما دامت أفكاري حية. لقاء كان فيه كثير من المحاور، صلنا وجلنا. أتمنى أن تكونوا قد سعدتم بهذا اللقاء. شكرا على متابعتكم، وتابعونا في الحلقة القادمة من برنامج أصحاب السلطة.